It wasn't me. It was my hand. The evil inside my hand made me do it. What an amazing excuse to try and blame, say, oh, I don't know, murder? You murder somebody, and when people come asking about it, the best you've come up with is, there's evil in my hand. Can you imagine? I mean, who would buy that? In today's episode of Microgenres, we try to come to grips with all the horror movies that feature a killer severed hand as the main focus of the film. The hand needs to be severed and animated on its own to go on killing for what will be a variety of reasons throughout the various films. The term evil hands actually does have a history to it that is easily confirmed when you start putting the term evil hands into search engines, and that history is mostly centered on religion, which also makes sense. A lot of Western religion is absolving people's sins and guilts for things they've done. There are tons of biblical quotes about the evil of Satan going into the hands too. For example, one of the most famous, "Idle hands are the devil's workshop." This comes from a translation from the Bible in 1971, but that was seemingly inspired by Chaucer in 1380 Canterbury Tales. In film history, evil severed hands go way back to 1924 for The Hands of Orlok, which has since been remade many times, and various movies on this list have been credited as being inspired by Orlok. But aside from mentioning it here, we won't be covering movies where a hand is evil while still attached to the body. It has to be off on its own recognizance, like Thing from Addams Family, but evil. Obviously, Thing would be a prime example, only he's a hero character and Addams Family is worth a mention, but it's more funny than horrific. We'll do this list chronologically, so the first film on our list is also actually the first severed hand movie in history. There are 9 in total. Let's go. The Beast with 5 Fingers. What a great title. The 40s and 50s were filled with descriptive titles like that, 20 Million Miles to Earth or The Thing from Another Planet. The plot concerns an old rich pianist's death and his inheritance and the desperate lives orbiting the situation, his nurse, his assistant, a flim-flam artist, and others. After suffering a stroke which paralyzed his body, he accidentally dies, falling out of his wheelchair, and from that point on a series of strange deaths proceed, and all that is seen or claimed to be seen is a hand wearing the old man's ring. The movie's a little light on scenes with the hand, but when they start, about an hour in, they're pretty well done. The entire movie's pretty good, not great, but good.
I need every minute of the day for my work. I have to stay right here in this library, and these books on these shelves are the great secrets I'm after.
A space shuttle crashes upon re-entry, and a living severed arm survives the crash and goes on a killing spree. I promise the concepts and executions do get better the further we go down the list. The only cast member I really recognized was Alan Hale, who's the skipper from Gilligan's Island. The movie's a bit of a wallflower, it's kind of forgettable, but for our purposes today, the biggest glaring failure is the arm itself. It's just not a hand. A hand is tough to pull off. See what I did there? Seriously though, a hand on its own needs both an amazing expressive performance as well as a clever way to conceal or show the stump. In every single shot of the crawling hand, there's never a moment that you're stymied as how the magic is being done. It's just somebody reaching in from out of the frame, or there's a hole cut in the floor and the stump is fake. And because it was an entire arm, there's not really any easy way to animate it, so it's just a clunky looking arm sticking out of a hole in the wall, and you're like, next. The first Amicus horror anthology, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors in 1965. There are 5 stories that get told through the framework of a tarot card reading on a train to 5 strangers, who include Donald Sutherland and Christopher Lee and Michael Goff, I think it's Goff, who are the subjects of our severed hand chapter called Disembodied Hand, which starts an hour in and is about 15 minutes long. Lee plays an obnoxious art critic who is humiliated and takes his revenge by trying to run down the artist Michael Goff, who humiliated him, and in doing so runs over his hand. The artist wakes up after they've amputated and he kills himself. And this is when the living severed hand starts attacking Lee. This again plays on his compounding guilt over his actions, and we as the audience get to decide if Lee is going crazy or really haunted by the hand of his victim. The actual prop of the hand is a wind-up clockwork hand with its visible mold seam and is unimpressive, but next to Christopher Lee, most everyone is. The movie overall is a pretty good one. A must if you like Hammer horror productions. Amicus is in a very similar vein. These themes are better explored with an artist losing their hand and going insane in The Hand from 1981, but there's so much more you can do in a feature runtime, and this was enjoyable and quick. Now next up, in 1973 we have And Now the Screaming Starts. It's another Amicus production, again similar to a Hammer horror picture, gothic and English and starring Peter Cushing, castles and taverns, you know what it is. The plot is maybe most similar to The Beast with Five Fingers, which focuses on one location, in this case the ancestral home for newlyweds, and the bride is haunted by a malevolent spirit, so we get that is it real or am I going insane dynamic again. The cast, with Herbert Lom, best known from the Pink Panther movies, Patrick McGee from A Clockwork Orange and other Hammer horror films, and the beautiful Stephanie Beacham really give the movie some class. Stephanie Beacham is great as always. If you don't know Beacham, you should check out her filmography. She's been everywhere and done everything from Hammer horror to 90210 to Dynasty, the daytime soap opera, to stage work, to Playboy shoots, and she was even in an Alien knockoff called Inseminoid that I covered in my Plot Copycat Alien episode. She was in Sequest DSV and so much more. The stars and aesthetics of the movie are the draw here. Beyond those standout features, the movie's pretty average-ish. Oliver Stone's second movie was a pseudo-remake of The Beast with Five Fingers, with Michael Caine going mad after his hand is severed in a car accident. The rest of the movie is played ambiguously as to whether people are being murdered by his supernatural severed hand or if he's lost his mind and doing all the killing himself. That's probably the best part of this movie, how it plays either way, like the ending to Total Recall or whether Deckard is a replicant or not in Blade Runner. As a comic book fan, one of the coolest points of interest is that Michael Caine plays a newspaper comic strip creator who does a weekly strip called Mandros, which is something in the style of Conan the Barbarian or Prince Valiant. The comics in the movie are all original works by the great Barry Windsor Smith. Barry is a prolific master artist who was the definitive artist on Conan. He also created the iconic Wolverine series Weapon X in Marvel Comics Presents. He worked at Marvel and then jumped aboard Valiant in the 90s as a key architect relaunching Solar Man of the Atom and creating Archer and Armstrong. He also worked at Malibu, Dark Horse, and Fantagraphics, leaving seminal work at every stop. His involvement in this film really gives it an added layer of authenticity and attention to detail that really tickles me. But The Hand was not the only severed hand horror movie to come out in 1981. Demonoid, Messenger of Death, 1981. Within the first 2 minutes we get boobies and a crawling severed hand, so that's a pretty promising start for a movie called Demonoid, Messenger of Death, and with this poster. I like a bizarre, odd movie, and this is the only severed hand horror movie that cuts off multiple hands from more than one person. As the evil travels, the possessed hand jumps from person to person. It's pretty low budget, so set expectations appropriately, but it's also stretching to fill its ambitions by being creative and pretty original. This is also the only movie where the hand murdered its person while still attached in order to escape, and then uses the corpse after death to chop itself off in a car door. I wouldn't say it's entirely satisfying to watch, like the poster never delivers anything really close to what it promises, but it has enough moments of lunacy and weirdness for me. Vinegar Syndrome put out a sweet Blu-ray DVD combo where the DVD has a different version of the film, as it was called Macabre, plus interviews and a reversible sleeve with the Macabre artwork on it. Now, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, is the only movie on the list that's a certified masterpiece. Every frame is brimming with creativity and humor and buckets of Caroseer, possibly the perfect balance between horror and comedy. Now, it's also worth noting that the severed hand scenes are brief in the movie, but they're really well done. This also sets up the most iconic element of the Ash Williams character, the chainsaw arm, which becomes a focus in each subsequent sequel. In the pantheon of Evil Dead movies, this is the movie that defines the tone and balance of humor and horror so perfectly, and the severed hand sequence is one of the best examples.
Son of a... Oh.
Now, I'm going to wedge in an honorable mention for Severed Ties in 1992, which focuses on a severed arm that is experimented on and becomes a reptilious monster. So, not really in the spirit of the Living Severed Hand movies, but it's still a great movie in its own right. It does have some really great weird shit in it, though.
Oh Jesus, the hand of God.
And he talks to it. It's a pretty wacky movie.
You're a killer because your dominant genes come from one. If your genes were completely mine, you'd have stayed on my shoulder where you belong. Stop!
Our second to last movie on our list is Quicksilver Highway from 1997. I would say this isn't that well known. It's quirky and strange, and I like quirky and strange. This is a horror anthology that only features two main stories being told by Christopher Lloyd as a mysterious curator of antiquities at the traveling circus, which includes a Hand of Glory.
Are you familiar with the Hand of Glory?
No, not so much. You want to give me the rundown?
The Hand of Glory is a dried and pickled hand of a man who has been hanged.
Cool story, bro. Anyway, he tells us two stories. One about Wind-Up Chattering Teeth, written by Stephen King. The second, written by Clive Barker, is called The Body Politic, about hands that revolt against their body. The hands are very expressive, and the story has a humorous tone perfect for surgeon Matt Frewer to go nuts with. The hands even speak to themselves at night to plan their revolution.
So, how will we do it? When the time comes.
We'll find a way, as long as it's a clean cut.
But suppose he resists?
A man resists with his hands will be in revolution against him.
The story becomes more cute and amusing than it is horrific, and that becomes the strange bargain the movie attempts to make with the viewers. You have to accept these silly ideas as scary. I don't know that it's entirely successful, but in the end, the most effective part of the entire movie is Christopher Lloyd's connecting scenes. When Idle Hands came out in 1999, I didn't really get it, actually. I remember my first viewing being confusing, like it wasn't scary enough for horror or funny enough for comedy, but every time since that I've watched it, it just cements it in my mind as being one of my favorites.
Idle Hands. are the devil's playground.
Idle Hands is the stoner comedy horror movie about evil that inhabits the laziest guy's hand. The cast is strong with Devon Sawa, Seth Green, Jessica Alba, Eldon Hansen, Jack Noseworthy, and Vivica A. Fox, plus a cameo from The Offspring.
Had your fun, now it's time to...
This came out when Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer were at the forefront of a horror revolution in the late 90s. And the thing about the 90s horror wave was, unlike the 70s and 80s waves, these movies were more mainstream and being backed by big studios. I think this movie just got lost in the gumbo of genres it represented. Plus, hardcore horror fans have a special love for the indie film and a special disdain for the studio picture, and all of that could have worked against the film. Director Rodman Flender should have got much more work based on this film. He had previously directed Leprechaun 2, and since then has worked primarily in television, directing many episodes of your favorite shows. So perhaps he's happy not doing feature work, but if he had wanted another crack at a feature, I think he deserved it. Christopher Hart is the hand actor, or the actor who played the severed hand, and he also played the hand in Quicksilver Highway as well as The Thing in all of the Addams Family movies. He also has a very playful and quick energy in those other films, but in Idle Hands he very much shows us a different, darker and sinister character.
So I'll show you Thing was more expressive and fun. If he was excited, he'd hop up like a little puppy dog. If he was nervous, he'd quiver.
You could try and wave off this bizarre handful of movies, thumb your nose at them, give them the finger if you want to. I just want to point out that I didn't do any glad handing or use kid gloves when it came to some of the less impressive productions or special effects. But if you told me there was a movie I missed, you can post it down below in the comments, because I gotta say, I'm stumped.